good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. I am your host, Shana Terrell, educator, activist dedicated to the freedom and liberation of her people. Yes, the lifelong struggle. Welcome back, everybody. Excited to have you all back this week. We are on the hills at the very end of Women's History Month. So shout out to all the dope sisters that I had on this month. Thank you, love you, and appreciate you. And of course, a shout out to the Center for Black Educated Development and Bright Beam for creating this post for us to talk to real people in the real struggle, doing the real work. And thank all of you for coming to the place where real educators talk about doing real things. So today's theme, we will be talking about building the Black educator pipeline and authenticity. Today, we're really going to get into what it is as we wear the mask and what it is like to unmask. But I'm so super hyped because to join me in this conversation today, we have our resident Baba, Dr. Greg Carr, my man, my mentor, associate at Howard University. Hey, Doc.
Hey, Mama Shana, how are you, my dear?
I'm doing good. You know, when you say mama, I'm like, ooh.
All right. That's all right. Well, you call me Baba, so I had to call you Mama.
You my Baba. You know, I got to earn my stripes in the community.
Yeah, so many you're responsible for. I'm always glad y'all holding it down up that way.
We are holding it down every day. 365 days of the year, the struggle always continues and always will be. So we definitely out here holding it down.
Did you send, I thought about our dear friend, Sister Kalila, who's the principal at Overbrook and a former, of course, teacher in the Freedom Schools, long time teacher in the Freedom Schools. I said, oh my God, is Kalila gonna have to send somebody out to LA to get West Philadelphia born and raised Overbrook graduate Will Smith? Anyway, I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna say less.
We have to send out light and love and community to that brother.
How about that? To everybody, yeah. And especially shout out to the Baba, to the old head who during the commercial break calmed everything down. Of course, from up your way. Now Vernon's own Denzel Washington. No question. Denzel's like, hold up.
Yes, speaking that fact, speaking that truth. And to understand it, right? Like, brother.
Beautiful.
We all got a moment. But let me pull you back in, brother.
Let me pull you back. Let me drop this mask for a minute. We out here in front of all these other people.
Yes.
Let me talk to you. And you, Chris. And come on, Tyler. Let's go over in this corner. Jay. Then he sat back down. That was a beautiful lesson in unmasking. Tactical unmasking. It was beautiful.
It was a beautiful lesson. And I'm glad you segue right into it, right? Like let's get into it. But it was funny as I was thinking about this week's episode and coming up and talking, and seeing the incident that happened with the Oscars. It triggered so much, right? Because the incident itself is so complex. It's people online are talking about so many different things that are connected to it, but it's really complex in a lot of different ways. It's not something easy to just talk about. It's not something easy to watch. And again, people have different ways of dealing with things that they see. Some people laugh, some people think it's funny, some people are grazing over it. But I think it still opens up an avenue for us to have real dialogue about what we saw and what that means, but not specifically about Will Smith, not specifically about Jada Pinkett Smith, and not specifically about Chris Rock, but about what this means to us as people individually.
Right.
And for me, immediately when I saw that, I thought of Paul Lawrence Dunbar and the mask we wear. Like I went right to that, okay, the mask we wear, because automatically, right? It's human nature sometimes to be very critical of people, to be very judgmental of people, especially at their worst moments. Like we all haven't had our worst moments or bad moments, right? We all have them. But it took me to the mask we wear. When people are saying things like, "Oh my God, how could he?" Or he was at the Oscars. Like, why would he? But it brings me to, right? The mask we wear. And it really hit on that for me. So for folks watching today, Doc, could you just let folks know a little bit about Paul Lawrence Dunbar?
Oh, sure. The Dayton's finest. I'm pleased to have visited his home, stood in his home. Shout out to the local chapter of the Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History in Dayton, and to my dear friend Kwaku Larry Crow and his wife Olabisi, who live in Dayton. Larry's a Dayton native. longtime educator, spent many years in independent school movement in Chicago, Institute for Positive Education. And every other year, Memorial Day, with the interruption of COVID, we go to Martin Delaney and Catherine Delaney and their children's graves just outside of Wilberforce. And then we come back to Dayton, um, to Baba Bing Davis's art gallery, the great artist. And so, but we also go by Paul Lawrence Dunbar's house, which is a National Historical Society site. Shout out to all the rangers, those black rangers, park rangers who oversee the site. And so standing in the room where he made transition, he bought that house. His mother lived with him. He didn't live a long life. He perished from tuberculosis. He lived here in DC for a while as well. Dunbar was one of the great writers, one of the great thinkers of his age, late 19th, early 20th centuries, a poet, an essayist, a member of the American Negro Academy, which he proposed be named the African Academy, but he lost that vote. He is well known, probably better known for his quote unquote dialect poems, When Melindy Sings and Christmas Gift and all these things. But he wrote across the range using the English language the way it should be used, like a tool to express something beyond the power of the English language. And one of his most famous, of course, poems, two of them, one, Sympathy, which of course is where we get the line that Maya Angelou made famous in her autobiography, I know why the caged bird sings. I know what the caged bird feels, the metaphor of the caged bird. And then, of course, We Wear the Mask. Dunbar, many of his poems focused on the realities of Black life, the joys, the triumphs, the pains. And then We Wear the Mask, he sits at the barrier between, as we developed the Africana Studies curriculum framework we wrote for the Philadelphia Public Schools, what we call the social structure, which of the 6 categories, that first category, the social structure asks, who are Africans to other people? And then the governance question, who are Africans to each other? And standing almost astride those 2 categories, which form the foundation for any really work that we should call Africana studies. It ain't just studying Black people. You got to stand in yourself. But you first thing you got to do is distinguish yourself from how other people view you and other society views you. Dunbar asks, what do I see from where I stand within myself in this governance formation? Who am I to my mother, to my family, to my community? And then looking at it, how this world looks at me, a world which has established for itself that I can never be human, no matter what I do. And of course, the Academy Awards asked Will Smith to leave, and he said no. I mean, the world, it doesn't matter how many movies, how many jokes, how many, at the end of the day, you never think I'm human. You just waiting. And so he writes, We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts, we smile and mouth with myriad subtleties. In other words, we talking to each other in plain sight, but you don't even know what we saying because we mouth with myriad subtleties. There, you don't even know what we said. You don't even know. We just egged you, but we just did you, but you don't even know. He says, he says, how does it go? We smile, but he says, we smile, but oh, great Christ, our cries to thee.
Yes.
From tortured souls arise. We sing that, oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world think otherwise. We wear the mask.
We wear the mask.
So we know each other. That's what we saw in their room the other night. The laughter, the anger, the pain, the argument, all of that, who these people are to each other, which is why I am laughing every time I read one of these Negroes trying to explain beyond our communities what went on in the New York Times, in Newsweek, all the posts. And I'm like, look at y'all trying to talk to everybody and nobody at the same time. Meanwhile, Black people with our full range of opinion, like, yeah, it's a different conversation. And I know a lot of people, I know you can, well, you don't have to do it because you're in a Black space. I know a lot of people who took Monday off because they didn't feel like being asked by the social structure. What do you think? It's not for you. They didn't want to put a mask on and leave the house Monday.
At all. And and I appreciate you giving us a little history on Paul Lawrence Dunbar and reciting, We Wear the Mask. And the reason why this was such an important connection for me, for a number of reasons, on a human level, yes. Regardless of race, everybody has a bad moment. Everybody makes mistakes. And being able to connect with just the humanness of who he is, I think, is where people have missed the mark of all races. But you've already said it in your previous comment, like, not seen as human. This man
Yeah.
isn't expected to, you know what I mean, have any emotion or whatever the case may be. And I also want to shout out, appreciate all the viewers out there watching. Please feel free to comment, like, and share as well,
And I see
as
Dr.
we engage.
Johnson from LA and Michelle Mayberry folk from North
Yeah, we
Carolina. I
got
ran to a sister yesterday in Mississippi, an elder who said that she watches. She said, "Tell Shane I said hello. I was at Sankofa yesterday." She said, "I don't miss." She was sitting in her doctor's office, and her son came in the bookstore and said he called her and put her on the phone. "Tell Shane I apologize." So
Come
I'm just
on,
letting you
say
know.
hey, mama. Thank you for watching.
An
Thank you so
educator, in
much.
fact, she said she wants some material around them freedom schools and all that Liberation Academy. She said, I need that now here. We trying to put a little school together. So just know that this is this is your
People are
work.
watching. I appreciate y'all. Thank
Absolutely.
you. I do.
Absolutely.
But what I wanted to connect about this was, it was interesting to me because as I watched it happen, and the thought that I was thinking and then surrounding the comments was, "Ooh, okay, he took that mask off," meaning
Or it fell off.
definitely, definitely fell off, right? And for me, meaning, in that moment, right? Like, you're expected to act a certain way. You're expected to be a certain way.
Right.
If you're in that room, if you're getting an award, if you're being recognized by these people in the Oscars and all these other things, like, you're expected to behave a certain way. But when you walk into that room, is he being him or is it a mask? The second part of this, where it got really complex for me, is did he take off his mask and just put on another one? Meaning,
Ooh.
that action, right? Is that who he really is? Is that who he really wanted to be in that moment? Or is that what he felt like he needed to do? So even as you talk about the governance structures, right? Like,
Yeah.
who we are to other people,
Yeah.
in that moment, he most certainly wasn't who other people thought him to be, who the academy thought he should be. But who was he in that moment to other Africans, right? And when you're saying
Yeah.
is black people, so many like, yeah, because he ain't nobody going to disrespect my wife, I would have smacked him too, right? That's who he should have been to other Africans, to certain people. Violence is never the answer. We should never be violent. So who
Well,
are we to other folks, right?
violence
So
is never the answer unless it's against us, in which point violence is always the answer. Ask any child in school right now.
ask people sitting in them seats at the Academy Awards. Ask the black people sitting in those seats all the things that black people had to endure.
Exactly.
That is still considered violence,
Exactly.
against us. So
Exactly.
I was
So
cracking.
violence is never the answer unless it's us.
Nope,
At which point violence is always the answer.
always the answer.
So I don't never say violence is not the answer or that violence is the answer. I just say violence is.
But when I tell you, when, like you said, these people writing these non-African people writing these articles and everything else, and denouncing violence and all this other stuff, I was like, well, where is the denouncing of violence every year
Can't
by
do that.
these institutions?
Can't do
Where
that.
is it?
Can't
Where
do that
is
because people are trying to prove their humanity. If you don't know you're human, then you certainly can't prove it to anybody else. So there's nothing you can say, no magic word. You can't, I mean, it's hilarious when we think about it. I mean, in fact, Shane, we probably should define what a mask is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the origins of the word that we use in English are rather obscure. The first thing I would do is, I'm looking for the etymology because, language carries culture. So what does it mean to be a mask? And one of the possible roots is Old French. And you can imagine, we know the definition of mask, but I mean, mask, that root word is where we get the word masquerade. It's where we get the word mascara. In other words, there's a covering, but the covering usually falls into two categories. It's either for disguise or for protection.
Mm-hmm.
And often when we talk about protection, it's protection from injury or protection from danger. And it doesn't always mean that protection is covering up who we are. Sometimes that projection is projecting and amplifying who we want the threat to think we are. So think about a Halloween mask, for example. Why did he put this mask on? Or why do you have this mask? Why do you have these exaggerated faces? Well, this is what I want to project outward. And so what we saw at the Academy Awards, and I don't watch them, just like I don't watch any football. I mean, first of all, if you go into a fun house, expect to have your image distorted. So when you went in there, you should know you're watching millionaires. So it's true. But what we saw and what we see in the classroom every day with students, with teachers, with people, what we see every day we walk outside of our house, which is one reason we have mirrors in our house, and many cultures don't have mirrors. What we see and what we saw was a form of masking, but multiple masks.
Yes.
What are you afraid of being injured by? Is it your wife? Because you were laughing. Was that a mask when you were laughing and you saw she wasn't laughing? Okay, let me switch masks. Let me project outward the thing I want you out in that split section. What is the danger?
Yes.
What's being injured? But masks are tools that are used to cover, but they cover for different reasons. And every teacher that is ever going into a classroom, certainly any Black teacher, like any human, has used a mask. But when you're in an environment that you think is hostile, and here we'll get into this in a minute, I'm sure as we continue our conversation finally, when you are in a classroom with Black students, you don't just feel the obligation to cover and protect yourself. You feel the obligation to cover and protect them because they're watching you and modeling how to mask in a society that is consistently hostile.
Yes. Yes. And you make an excellent point, because when I saw that, right? So when we blow past the Oscars and blow past like the drama and shock of it, I immediately thought about Black educators. And the reason why I immediately thought about Black educators is because, yes, we're watching Will Smith, we're watching a human, but we're also watching him at work. He's going to an award ceremony or whatever for his job, right?
That's
He's
exactly
at
right.
work. So like that's his profession.
He is at work.
So there are Black educators who walk into work every single day and wear the mask or expected to mask.
That's
Right?
right.
So when I saw that and I saw what happened, I was just like, he's at work and he's having a really bad day at work. And then it got me to thinking about educators. They
That's right.
walk into work every day. And what mask are they wearing? How do they feel about wearing a mask? Do folks even know that they're wearing a mask, right? And the performative nature of which we as Black people sometimes have to show up in white spaces.
That's right.
And that is what I really like contemplated on when I watched him, is like, what are the effects on this as education and when people show up to work every day?
That's a profound question.
It's not just again, like I said, a Will Smith thing. Yes, it happened, but he was at work and we show up to work every day in these white spaces. And as we know, education is a dominated white space. Folks are walking in with white supervisors, white bosses, white colleagues, and are expected to behave, look, and act a certain way. And then what are the consequences of that when
What
you
are the
don't?
consequences? Well, what are the consequences of anything we do as teachers? Because again, we have young people. Isn't it remarkable how, and let's think about this, all of us who are educators, how students take on the attributes of their favorite teachers.
Yes.
You walk into any school, kindergarten, pre-K, university, graduate school, professional school, and what you'll find often is students gravitate toward the humans who they feel like they're the most like. So during the breaks, you'll find these students clustered around this teacher's classroom, or after school, you'll find them coming back to these teachers. And so we're always modeling, and then that includes modeling. I mean, if you're a Black educator, you know, when you're talking about masking, you're talking about modeling, you're talking about negotiating your identity outside of your home and self. You're talking about protecting and standing in the gap for those younger selves.
Yes.
If you're a Black teacher in an environment where you don't have a lot of Black students, and one of the reasons why at HBCUs, including Howard, there are so many Black students who come to HBCUs because as Black students, they were often one of a handful, if sometimes the only Black student in their high school or in their educational experience. So they come for that place. But if you're a teacher in a place like that, you are constantly thinking about how you represent yourself. That's really what Clyde Taylor and others would call the politics of representation. But we often say represent and don't pause long enough to process what that word means. It means literally, this is myself, and now I'm going to represent it, but not just myself. I'm going to represent what I want you to know about where I come from, who I am. You walk in a school building, I mean, you know, the wildly popular Abbott Elementary. These are representative types. So when we see Shirley Ralph's character, that is a classic example of how women of African descent for generations have represented what Black women look like and are as educators in a school. How many Black women do we know with that sweater or that Oxford, you know what I'm saying, the skirt, voice never gets above, baby, bring me that pencil. Every teacher is teaching the whole time she or he is in the space.
Much agree. And I think the point that you make is an important point in terms of the mask, because that's the other thing I thought about. How are people modeling that mask for children? How are you showing children to show up
Mm.
in spaces? Because that is where they learn. Um, I think that children are very much attracted to the most authentic people in the building. I've always found that people. I mean,
Yeah.
because children aren't wearing a mask, right? They're taught to wear masks. That's the other part
Good point.
of what I thought about, right?
Good
Children
point.
are children. They are authentic. They are themselves. That's why people be like, out of the mouths of babes, or children have no filter, because they're not. When we're talking about social engagement and learning how to socialize, you don't wake up or grow up or come out the womb wearing a mask. You just you.
You
So
just you.
when children evolve, they are taught the lessons they have. They're taught to actually wear the mask. So the
Yeah.
question then becomes, what are we modeling for these children, and what mask are we teaching children to wear? And then for me, what drew really in was like that whole respectable Negro, right? This respectability politics,
Interesting.
modeling for children how you have to be, what you have to do. And it really got down to me when we start to talk to children, especially even about language and how they
Yes.
speak and how you talk and how you act, or that's not appropriate for the classroom. You don't need to behave this way in school. X, Y, and Z. All of
Hmm.
those things, we're modeling what mask they should be putting on when they're walking into our door, when they're coming into our classrooms.
That's right.
So all of that was like super interesting for me as adults in these education space. What mask are we wearing? And then what are we modeling for children about what mask they should be putting on? And it's just, again, to me, it's just so layered.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, as you say, it's completely layered. We're humans, which means we're in a state of perpetual masking. I think about the recently transitioned Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks about being one with existence, and at any moment just pausing, taking in that deep breath, releasing that breath. And how many convenings have we had with our young people over the years, Shannon, where we just said, okay, we're going to pause,
Yep.
but take in a breath. And as the great master teacher, Dr. Aisha Imani, always reminds us, I'm what a master teacher. I've seen her in groups of 1,000 people down at Haley Farm for the Children's Defense Fund. And I've seen her in intimate spaces, as intimate as just, 3 or 4 of us around. And she always reminds us, silence is the great difficulty for so many of us, because you can't hide from yourself.
Mm-mm.
So when you take that breath and just be quiet, the only thing there is everything.
Yep.
Meaning everything is there. And that's what Thich Nhat Hanh teaches us. I mean, everything's there. Now, once you begin to express, you are in a form of representation. We get up in the morning, when we leave, in the moments when we're leaving the house. I mean, think about the radical shift in who we are as our quote unquote authentic selves, and who we are when we physically leave wherever we've slept the night before.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what COVID-19 did, for example, to what would be considered in a representative society as hygiene. Let's talk. The whole idea that when you go to school, you got to smell a certain way, you have to dress a certain way. There are people who, as COVID-19 restrictions eased, had to go out and get new shoes, new pants, new clothes. They didn't fit anymore. Do you know the last time I had on hard? I didn't wear hard shoes for a year and a half. I had to go out for something. I said, well, where did I put my shoes? I said, I don't know wearing no shoes. I mean, so the idea of authenticity shifts depending on who you're in conversation with. So
Yep.
we think about ourselves at the
Mm-hmm.
core. And Thich Nhat Hanh would say, if you are truly yourself, you're aware that you are just part of existence. But then if you take a ring around that and say the people closest to you see you the most, then the people who's beyond that, then the people every time we engage with a ring, we are representing something.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are a teacher, that ring, the work ring, is maybe what, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you're lucky, it's closest to yourself. If you're a Black educator in a Black community, in a Black school, where you know the parents, you know the children, you know the communities, you can be closer to the person who is at your house before you leave. We have educators, and we know many of them. You were educated like that yourself. I think about Sister Njamela. How in the world does every family member in that child's household have your phone number and it never stops ringing? Because I have extended my representative self. So that type of authenticity engenders trust. I trust
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Because I know if something's happening, I ain't got to wait till my child goes to school. I can just text you right now.
Yeah.
These are the things. And so people say, well, why do we need Black teachers? Oh, if you don't understand, then you understand before apartheid ended with all of the terrible things. One of the things that it did, however, preserve was the ability of a teacher to be part of a community where the schooling didn't begin at the beginning of the school day and ended at the end of the school day. She or he was part of a community where it was very clear we are community teachers, and this professional teacher is an extension of our family. That's one of the things. If you're going to be a Black teacher, you have to understand that.
I agree wholeheartedly, and you make the perfect connection. Like, again, real recognize real.
No question.
I
Every
see
time.
the authenticity in you. You are me, I am you. That's why the familiarity is there when folks see each other in an authentic manner. Like, oh, she one of us. Like, that's our people.
That's
And
our people.
why people still text me. People still call me.
That's
People
right.
still invite me to stuff because
That's
real recognizes real. And I think what you're talking about too is you point out some of the positive effects of when people can just unmask and be their authentic selves.
That's right.
When people can just unmask and connect with one another. To me, it's a very liberating feeling, right? It's liberating. Yeah. It's also a movement that moves towards liberation. And
That's
even
right.
when we connect this to like Will possibly unmasking the night of the Oscars, like maybe he felt liberated, like, you know what? I have arrived. I'm gonna do what I want to do, even if it's walking up on the stage and smacking the fire out this other grown man. Not saying it was right, but to him, like, F it, I'm tired of sitting down in this suit and keeping my mouth closed while this man disrespect my wife. I'm tired of it.
No question.
Damn,
Or maybe I'm tired of people thinking that I'm not capable of being strong in public.
there you
Because
go.
again, I mean, if we again with that Africana Studies framework, if we consider the range of conversations we've been having as Black people, as people of African descent, is very different than the conversation that Black people have been trying to have outside of Black communities to explain what went on. I just started laughing because at the end of the day, we know within Black spaces, there is a range of thought that says, yeah, dude, you are masking, as you said, you're performing for her.
For her. Yes.
Because we know they had, you could have just shouted him. You could have just had that. You could have said the same thing you said. And then, of course, we know that there are many circumstances. People talk about gender and protect Black women. I'm like, everybody slow your roll. Are you talking to the social structure or within the governance structure? Because we know, trigger warning, that there are a number of women who would have slapped that AWS, and he wouldn't have had the chance if it had been bought. In other words, there are all kind of things going. The problem comes, one of the problems we have, and this applies, of course, to teachers, is when we find ourselves trying to talk to everybody at the same time. We end up talking to nobody. Again, Dunbar says, we mouth with myriad subtleties, which is why for me, the moment of that slap is less important than watching Denzel after the cameras went. We mouth with myriad subtleties. In other words, nobody Black needed a translator to know what him and Tyler Perry was saying to Will Smith over there. Nobody Black needed anybody to translate when he bent down, started talking to Jada. Nobody Black. And in that one moment that Will Smith shared, playing a man that, by the way, is a very complex a person who you have a different conversation with in the governance structure. Richard Williams had a whole ass other family before him and Oracene had them other kids.
Yes, he
this
did.
is a different conversation.
Had a whole ass other family after as well.
Come on. Do you understand? So people say, well, Richard Williams, no, you don't. Hey, stay out of Black people conversation. That's a social structure. You don't even know what we talk about. But when Will Smith stood there with that statue after having refused to leave, because the social structure is like, okay, yeah, this ain't Independence Day. This ain't Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. This ain't I Am Legend. This ain't I, Robot. This is who we know all of y'all are. You gotta go. Now they didn't ask John Wayne to leave when he damn near beat up that Lakota sister who Marlon Brando sent to get the Oscar that he won for the Godfather to reject the whole print. They ain't asked John Wayne when he was tearing the place up backstage. You know what I'm saying? When he did that, yeah, you ain't asked, but Will Smith, oh yeah. Yeah, in the words of another honoree, Samuel L. Jackson, who got a Distinguished Service Award or something, one of them statues, over the same weekend, as he told Lawrence Fishburne in School Days, y'all N-words, and you're gonna be N-words forever, just like us. So anyway, the point is,
one of my favorite movies. One of my favorite movies.
You ain't
But
gonna
yes.
be who you. But I said all that to say is as a background to the point that when we unmask, we also narrow as Black people. In other words, whatever the masks were that Will Smith was wearing in that moment, whatever the masks were that Jada Pinkett Smith was wearing, whatever the masks were, when Will Smith said, Denzel told him, yeah, man, at your moment of your greatest triumph, at your job, at work, that's when the devil comes for you.
Comes for you at your
People
highest.
think maybe in the social structure that he was talking about white people. And many of the race translators, who I'm really enjoying them, twist themselves into somersaults to explain to white people what happened as if they can do that. Well, no, he's blah, 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 blah. Please understand that word devil is a floating signifier.
Floating.
Denzel is saying at that moment of triumph, you might get so loose, you show somebody what you really thinking.
Yes.
Denzel say, man, we at work. In fact, it's so funny. I don't know. I don't watch this. Oh wait, no. It's the brother. Remember Denzel in the Equalizer? I think it was 2, where the young cat, I forget his name. He was in the Wu-Tang series as well. He played like Denzel's little mentee, or you know, and they were interviewing Denzel and Paulette Washington, and the kid went by at this summer award, and he said, "Oh, I think I just got cast in something." He said, "Really?" He said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Okay, good, man. I see you at work." And then he went back to the. In other words, I don't know you yet. I'm gonna get to know you, but we're in a professional. I'm sure part of, hey man, we at work, just like you said. So at that moment of greatest triumph, don't let that mask.
Don't let it fall, brother. Don't let it fall.
Right.
But you know who? Again, when the Denzel and even the Tyler Perry thing, when he came over as well, they represented for me. I thought about Black educators. This is why we need Black educators, and this is why we need Black educators to stay in the profession. They are the veteran teachers in your building, right? That is who they were. That is who Denzel was.
Nice.
The veteran teacher in your building who's going to pull you aside and say, let me have a word with you about this. You know what I mean? Well, let me talk. I didn't see the kids come out your room. Well, let's talk about your lesson. You know what I mean? Not anything that has to be performative or in front of anybody. This is for us. But this is why Black veteran educators are needed. This is why Black teaching traditions are needed. This is why all of that has to be connected, because that is what Denzel represented for me to Will Smith. A Black veteran teacher in your building that is going to pull you aside, wipe you up, wipe your little tears, but set you on a path to be successful. Like, no matter what happens after this, you know what I'm saying? I got your back. But you put your mask back on because it fell off.
That's right.
You're going to sit here and get your award.
That's right.
Put your mask back on because it fell off. But I got your back. But
that's
remember
right.
These words.
Exactly. And if one of them over there tell you gotta leave, tell them come see me. In other words, that whole thing, right? But that's not the conversation we gonna have, right? To children, you walk in a building, or you like to say, look, is the color of your fingernail polish, is getting in this fight, is returning that insult more important than this college application essay we got to do this afternoon? In other words, take a minute and breathe.
Yes,
you're absolutely right. The pipeline is called a pipeline for a reason. There are various places along a pipeline. If you are a new teacher, you don't know like the elder teachers. I remember when Teach for America first came into existence, and the schools were flooded, including Philadelphia, with these young teachers, mostly white, who had never been teachers, who took a few weeks of training. You dump them in a building. The smart ones found the veteran teachers. Because you don't know, because the other thing about a Black veteran teacher, as we know, you know the signs and signals. There was a conversation those 3 Black men had that they didn't have to go through a translation. In other words, hey man, nah, bro, calm down. And then here come the white agent. Okay, I know that's your friend. I know y'all know each other a long time, but we've been Black men since we came out of our mother's wombs. So just hold on for a minute before we go, because we're not. This is not a translation, and it's very important to understand, because, as I said, masking means narrowing. If the more unmasking you do, the more narrowing you're doing. When you are yourself, you have the people who know you best will be there. I think that's why Black schools are so important, and why Black teachers at Black schools are so important. I don't mean HBCUs only. I mean all the schools around the country and around the world, because we got people watching from Africa to Caribbean, where the people look like you. That is a space where you can unmask, but it is a narrow space in some ways. The broader the space, the more the masks go on. When you go to professional conferences, you go into a space of it, it's like, okay, I'm in what we might call the street. We act differently in the street. I laugh because people talk about the politics of respectability, and I laugh and I say, okay, give me an example of something that doesn't involve the politics of respectability. I want to be myself. No, you're never just yourself. You're always interacting with expectations. All respectability means is, what are the rules by which I interact in this space?
In this space.
No question. Now, if you bring a Tupperware to school as a teacher with greens in it, and you microwave it, and the smell of the greens go out in the hall. If you in a black space, it's no problem. People say, "Give me some of that." If you in another, what is that? I've never smelled that. Now the mask got to go up. You know what I'm saying? It's a problem. I mean, this is why we have to have a critical mass of black teachers, and we have to protect black spaces. Last thing I'll say on that very quickly is that if you find yourself as a teacher in a space where you got to explain your humanity all the time, how do you do your hair? Oh, that's an interesting nickname. You need to replenish yourself with those spaces where you don't have to do that.
Yes.
It's a center for educator development. It is a liberation academy or freedom school. It's your family. It's your church. It's your community. But don't be a black person out here in these streets without a place to retreat from the streets to. It will destroy you.
It will destroy you. It will destroy you. It will consume you. And
yes.
it will destroy you and will consume you. And yes, you're talking right. We wear different masks in different spaces. But for some people would have seen when they don't get the opportunity to unmask, they don't know who they are.
And that's how you end up with what we saw Sunday night.
Listen.
Seriously.
Yes.
Because you know better than that, boy. If his mama had been sitting there, because remember Lupita, from East African, raised in Mexico, born in Mexico, she was like, that look on her face, we all know that look. But if you're a continental African, if you was raised in a certain space around certain kind of people, you don't never let people, you know what I'm saying? That look perfect O on her face. She's like, oh, oh my.
Definitely.
Because it's a protocol. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely. Oh my.
Coolness. The most uncool person in that room was the one who told the joke. Chris Rock is, I don't know him. I don't know Chris Rock, but his public mask amplifies this caricature of blackness. All teeth, all eye buck, all even when he's smoking a crack pipe in New Jack City. Pookie. So you expect that kind of energy. The question is, how do you engage with it? And of course, when you wear that particular mask, I don't know who Chris Rock is. Who knows? You know, but apparently the ticket sales for his comedy tour have shot through the roof. Why? Because the social structure sees him as the victim. Yes. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But who are we to other people? You know what I'm saying?
It's very important. And another issue that brought up for me, as a black woman in an education space.
Yes.
The Chris Rock versus, and not them as people, but the action. Chris Rock's words were violent towards a black woman who was suffering from a medical diagnosis. It was inappropriate. It was poor taste. And it wasn't appreciated.
That's right.
When the black woman's husband reacts in a certain manner that people don't find appealing, or, oh, he was just wrong. And Chris Rock isn't a victim. I'm not saying he deserved to be physically assaulted in the way he was, but he's also not a victim. And many times, I know for this is probably in all professions, but specifically in education spaces, what I witness is white people assaulting black children. And then when black people stand up and the mask comes off for black children,
come on now,
we become the villain. And I think that's extremely, that's why I said this is so complex, because it's very problematic on, you shouldn't have spoken to her that way, or you have to leave people with dignity. You're not out here leaving black kids with dignity. So why is it my responsibility to afford that same kind of compassion to them, an adult, no less? But for me, that's like a negative and a positive of unmasking. When I see somebody insulting black children, like, the core of who I am is going to come out, and that's a liberator and that's a fighter. But there are consequences to that, like real serious negative consequences to me being able to show up in education spaces and authentically be that person for black children. And I think that a lot of black people deal with that struggle and that fight every day, because there are consequences to that. A couple of weeks ago, I had Akosa Wallace on the show, and he spoke about how it's not easy, and it's dangerous, right?
It is dangerous
to show up and be a liberator and a warrior for black children. It's very dangerous.
That's right. I mean, what are teachers what are adults teaching children, and what are we teaching each other on that type of behavior when you don't stand? As you say, in instructional practice, in hostile environments, often we're called upon when we are facing a social structure that is hostile to us to be messiahs or saviors or to act a certain way. And we, rejecting that comes with a cost, because if we're standing with and for and alongside children, we're also modeling behavior. I mean, I think about, somebody like Benjamin Mays, who's President Morehouse, and one time he was called a Black America school teacher. He's the guy, you know, and now we have Yves Saint Laurent, is it, who has done this tribute to Morehouse and Spelman in clothing. Well, they call it a tribute, but they can really make all the money in the world. But looking at them going back through Morehouse and Spelman yearbooks, the sisters in the white cotton dresses, the brothers in the tweed and the button down and all that, people are saying, oh, this is the classic look. No, this was a moment in time when adults are teaching Black children what it will take to represent themselves in a world that is hostile to them. And perhaps if you're dressed a certain way and move through the world a certain way, it will relieve you of having to suffer certain things. Put this mask on. Well, fast forward to what you're saying. In a moment of confrontation, in a moment of conflict, the children are watching you. And so, they're not always going to model if you shrink from the moment of protecting them because you're trying to keep your mask on in a hostile environment and preserve this notion. Now, at the same time, many Black teachers find themselves in that heroic savior messiah mode, which is equally, if not more, upsetting and draining. In other words, oh, it's a fight, go get Mr. So-and-so. Oh, it's a fight, go get Mr. So-and-so. Why I gotta be the one to come in every situation involving Black children because you scared, you don't want. If everybody just be more human in the world, I wouldn't have to come home and take this drink or sleep as soon as I sit down or great, because super Black is a mask too.
I was going to say, we remember that episode we did months ago about Black people not being a monolith.
No question.
The fact that they think that just because I'm Black, I mean, I'm saying I can, but not everybody. Just because you Black, you can know how to break up a fight. Just because you Black, you know how to deal with conflict. All Black people didn't grow up physically fighting their whole life. Right? That's not a thing. But to call on somebody, now I got to put on this mask and corral these children. Like that. All of that again is why I'm saying this is so complex. Because the other question I pondered while watching this, all adults aside, is what are Black children going through, right? In schools, in public education, in society, the violence that they are facing at the hands of public education, because Black teachers are expected to show up and wear masks. Because of that, Black children are being perpetuated, violence against them every day. But the other question I then pondered through all of this is this why people have such a problem with Black children? Because they don't mask. I'm going to show up every day and be who I am. And that's a problem for you because your expectation is when I walk in this building is for me to mask. So is that a problem for you that I'm not masking? And because I'm really telling you who I am?
Interesting. That is very interesting. It's interesting. There was a sister, Crystal Henning, who was a professor at Georgetown. She was at Howard yesterday. And we had a number of our students, the Introduction to African-American Studies class. Shout out to my assistant, Angie Carter, who is from Philadelphia. She Philadelphia Public High School graduate. She coordinated, got all our students over there. And Kristen Henning has written a book on policing Black children and the assault on Black children. And as she gave the statistics on how many Black children end up being violated, really, the violence against Black children that occurs, not just in policing, but as you say, in the schools, stop because they're wearing something different or harassed, going through metal detectors. The stories that these college students started sharing that they had never shared, with how it felt to go through a metal detector every day, how it felt to be surveilled by school police. And really, that's what happened to y'all. And I got students from all over the world, really. There was some students, this young lady who was a nursing student from Cuba. She said, at home, we weren't scared of the police, but I got to the United States. I'm like, why they keep stopping me? She said, well, they said you're an immigrant. She said, no, I'm a citizen here. She said, no, but you did. So they called ICE on me, and then 5 police cars show. I mean, this whole constant state of surveillance. When you come to school, there should be the ability to trust your educators. And Asa Hilliard writes about this in Young, Gifted, and Black, and Teresa Perry. and Claude Steele. One of the things that young people should be able to depend on is teachers. And if you don't have the faith that a teacher can help you learn, then everybody in the building is hostile.
Help you learn, or just basic need, keep me
Right.
safe.
Keep me safe.
I trust the
Right.
adults in my building. Just keep me safe.
Keep me safe.
That keeps you in a constant state of paranoia and fear about what issues or what's going to take place and happen today. And somebody wrote something really key in the comments. She said the kids who wear the mask the best are the ones who are rewarded. And I realized that as a kid, and it's insidious.
That's true.
And that's in point. Yes, shout out to Joy.
I realized I was that kid. We all at some points were. So what's the lesson we take from that, Shane? What's the lesson we take? How as teachers do we revisit that and change that?
But see, it blew me up, right? When I started thinking about this. And this is why it blew me up, Dr. Carr, because what it made me realize is when I'm in all Black spaces with kids, I'm like, you perpetuate teaching them the mass, meaning this idea of code switching. I don't think white kids get talked to about code switching, because I've walked into spaces, and I mean, they are their true authentic selves in any space I walk to. I mean, when
the masks are not racial.
Or I'm not even talking about the whole, like, they're acting a certain way, like they are themselves. They don't put on
but what I mean by that, I mean, look at the contrast between the first iteration of the Wonder Years on ABC and the current iteration with an all-Black cast in Montgomery, Alabama. In other words, you got the nerds, you got the jocks. In other words, the masks are there, but the mask they don't require is the racial mask.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That's all I meant. All human beings are going to mask, but that race, because race means human. We can't be human. So you're absolutely right. I think like performing to type means, can I wear now the mask of whiteness on top of this other mask? And that's difficult.
Yes.
But you get rewarded.
You do. You really, really do.
You get rewarded.
You
also get rewarded for the mask of Blackness that isn't disruptive. So the idea, for example, that grades can be tied to race. In other words, I'm going to give you a C for being quiet. Okay, why? Because I don't expect that you can learn like a human. So therefore, I'm going to adjust my expectations based on who I think you are. And then we perform to type. If you are an educator giving out grades because you want students to be quiet, you are wearing a mask. Because the only question, and I ask this question every time.
You're wearing the mask of destruction, because that's dead wrong.
No question, because you wouldn't do that with your own children. I mean, every time we would have,
you wouldn't want that for your own kid.
You wouldn't want it. I would always ask people, say, well, here's our new plan. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to, here's it. And I would say, I just got two questions. One, do you have children? Yes. Number two, would you let them do this? If the answer is no, I'm leaving this meeting right now. Why? Because you experiment with other people's children. You know
and when I tell you, I've sat in multiple conversations where when that started coming and my little mask came off, like, hold up. Wait a minute. I got to put on the mother at home mask. I wouldn't allow the schedule to get, like, I would never allow my kid to be in a school that has this kind of schedule or whatever the case is going on. But you wouldn't either. You wouldn't right across the road.
What do you think about me?
What do you think
I'm going to sit here and not say nothing? And guess what? That goes to all of y'all policymakers out here, because one of the masks that we wear, is the spectacle. In other words, it ain't just the I'm gonna dress like everybody. Sometimes it's the I'm gonna dress different than everybody and come in here loud, come in here with a little hood language, come in here shaking and dancing, and you're gonna reward me. Why? Because you don't think I'm human. You would never accept this from somebody you respected. It's a lot of spectacle Negroes out here on the circuit these days. Now, are they educators? I wouldn't want them anywhere near
my kids.
No question.
I wouldn't
because I mean, there are a couple of things that are very important for us to understand. Very simple things that we should understand. You can't, in education, get around some basics. You have to read. Images are no substitute. Sound is no substitute. Studying requires reading. You've got to sit with the books. You've got to sit. You can't perform. But what we see often in terms of masking, we have educators, which means the children are picking up masking as if they're educators. Okay, well, y'all can't read that, so I'm gonna make a song out of it. No, don't make a song out of it. Everybody 15 minutes, drop everything and read. And I'm not talking about reading the stuff we have now. If you notice, books have gone from this number of words on a page to this number of words. I'm like, where are the books? I'm talking about academic. What? Go get that Maya Angelou. Go get that W.E.B. Du Bois, and go get that Paul Dunbar and sit with it.
Well, one thing you are an example of, and I think that this is great, and because you transcend time in a way, right? Meaning you are on social media. If anybody
Yeah,
follows you or knows you, you are on social media, you are tweeting, you are on the gram. So you're in that social media life. But at the same time, you don't excuse yourself from being a steward. You are still reading,
of
you are
course,
still studying.
of course.
You promote reading, you promote studying. Saying that to say that you can do both and you can be both. And I think that that's super important.
I appreciate that.
So though you have students do a song and do a dance, do a rap, that's
Sure.
fine. That's fine. But is that all they're doing? What are they
Yes,
reading about? What is the content behind the material? What is the foundation behind the material? Are
that's
you the one doing all the heavy lifting? Are you the one doing all the content knowledge and just kind of breaking it up in bite sizes for them and be like, now let's go make something out of it because I done taught y'all a little something instead of allowing the children to be the stewards of their own education.
and that when you had the anniversary show, I think that conversation that the sisters were having right before we had conversation, that is key to that because it takes time. The best educators aren't performers; they engender people's capacity. And there's a fine line and a balance because people learn differently. I mean, when I think of an effective educator for me, I'm modeling what they're doing. They
Yes.
don't have to show me with guiding my hand or correcting me. I'm gonna watch you and I'm gonna repeat. Then I'll add. One of the difficulties we have is that there is a lot of performance in education.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, this is again about building this Black educator pipeline is so important. Teachers need to see. Asa here used to always say, teachers need content knowledge and they need to enhance their practice in being able to convey content knowledge while eliciting students' capacity to acquire that content knowledge. But you can't convey content knowledge to somebody one way. They've got to absorb it. You got to give them space to breathe, space to think. And one of the great, I think, constant successes and failures in our long arc of 20 plus years with freedom schools in Philadelphia and beyond is that we refuse to compromise on content and literacy. We simply refuse. But we're in a system that is perpetually compromising on that so that it becomes a question of time. And that is where it's difficult. People say, well, Daddy Carr, who is going to be like you? And I said, I don't have an answer for that because that's not something you can pick in a manual. You got to sit. It's very easy. Here, read this, come back, let's talk about it. There's the challenge. Why? Read this. Oh,
I ain't.
or is there something? No. I'm just, I'm not asking you to do, and I'm not asking you to do anything you can't do.
Yep.
You know what I mean? If you don't understand the word construct, let's talk about it. But the moment you say read this, and I'm here with you, the response to that is probably going to determine the future of the Black race in the United States. I'm not really so much worried about African people in the Caribbean or African people in Africa, increasingly maybe because they're watching us. I'm worried about the American Negro. Ignorance is worse than COVID-19. It is a disease.
It is.
It is tied to illiteracy, not illiteracy. Illiteracy means you can't read. It's tied to illiteracy. You can read, you just choose not to. I got into a whole thing Tuesday where the California just passed a recommendation for reparations that's restricted only to those who were enslaved in the United States. That's utterly absurd. The legal challenge that they're constructing the notion of lineage around will be challenged in court, and it's going to be used as a proxy for race. I'm trying to explain the legal dimension of it to people who have never opened a law book, never read a case, and convinced that I'm dead wrong. And I'm saying this is illiteracy at work. This is illiteracy at work. I ain't mad at y'all. I'm just realizing you victims of the education system. This is what Carr G. Woodson was talking about. Look at yourself. Stop it. Out of love. You know what I'm saying? Because people laughing at you and you're not going to get reparations.
But again, you bring up excellent points, right? And that's that whole bite-sized education. You see a thing, you see an article, but you don't have any history, any content knowledge of it or of the thing or of the subject. And it's such a setback. But it goes along with what you said when we was on the anniversary show. I think like even these arguments about CRT, it's stupid. None of you have ever opened law books to be able to speak like an expert or educated on any of this. And some of this stuff is beyond experience. It has to be knowledge. You have to do the studying. You have to do the reading. You
That's
have
right.
to. So you
That's
make
right.
an excellent point. So to me, what I'm hearing you say is, baby, when y'all put on these masks, you better be masters of the content, okay? You better be liberation
Yes.
warriors for children, all right? These the
Yes.
masks that we have to show up in, not the
And we've
mask.
done it. I mean, you got teachers who exhaust themselves because the mask they wear is the mask of I know everything. That's an impossible burden.
Yes,
Some
it
teachers feel
is.
like they have to do that.
But see, Dr. Carr, this is where I got to give you your props once again. And the reason why I say that is because you already know, like you come into education spaces and you hold a bunch of knowledge, right? You are the experts in many rooms and the expert in
Mm.
content, but you never walk into a room like that. Even now, you
No,
shake
I
your head
know
like,
what I don't know. I
yeah,
know a fraction. It's-
right. But you say you know a fraction, and people be saying like, baby, if you know a fraction, I know nothing. But
and that's the tragedy.
yes,
That is
yes.
the tragedy is that we just not all of us not just regular. What happened in this country? Ask yourself, what happened in the United States so that everybody doesn't have that level?
Well, you already know when you're existing within a Eurocentric environment, it's very individualistic and it's the power of the one, right?
Well, it is in that respect. But let me ask you this, and I know when we think about this stuff all the time. You know, who asks uh when you have all these athletes in a place, when you have the top 75 in NBA history and they're around talking to each other, nobody questions all of their expertise in basketball. I mean, it isn't that we don't have the ability, it's that this society has picked for us where that ability is seen as the norm. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you had 75 black women professors having a conversation about, oh, this is very, but 75 football players, no problem. Oh, do you know what? And then we run off this side here together. What the hell just happened? This is all education.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point, Doc.
Yes. I
That's
mean,
an
one of
excellent
the
point.
beautiful things I love so much when we class in freedom school, I would love when the academic advisors would get together to talk. I don't even want, I'm not saying nothing. I love going in buildings and where, shout out to Don Staley. I hope she wins the national championship. That's
Yeah.
one of Dobbins. I go over to Dobbins High School. They have professional development. First thing I say is, this is not professional development. I came down here to sit and listen. And I'm sitting in the room with all the teachers. Why? This is heaven. Why? These are, and teachers are not valued that way. Listen to the teachers and listen to them talk to each other. It's
Yes.
a beautiful thing. You know what I'm saying?
But I hear teachers wanting and asking for that more and more and
Yes.
more and more. But I think again, you raise another good point of why we need to build Black quality teachers, because
Yes.
teachers love to sit, especially Black people love to sit in community with
Yes.
one another, love to learn from one another, love to talk. And I mean, when you get a real positive group of Black, they love to compliment one another.
Oh, no question.
You know, Dr. Carr, you know what you had said about someone was like that was excellent. And so,
Yes.
so I see your less like they do that and
Yes.
they share in community. And I feel like that is the nature of
Yes.
African people. And that's
It
when you
is.
see who we are to each other at its finest. Like
That's right.
we
And
are
and
experts
it's
for each other.
voluntary unmasking. That's where you see the mask fall, and that's where the good stuff is. Now, my
Yes.
question becomes, what happens when we have compulsory demasking? I'm worried about that. Like with COVID, like we were talking about this the other day, saying what's going to happen, not when they say you don't have to wear a mask, when they say you can't wear a mask. Because at some point they're going to say, Black people, y'all can't keep walking in this store with this mask on your face. In other words, you got to take these masks off. Now, in terms of
Ooh.
educators, what happens when people prevail on excellent Black educators to tell everybody how they do it?
Mm,
No, that compulsorily demasking is tedious and it can be offensive. Show
very
me grit.
offensive.
This is grit. Show me, what are you doing? I'm not performing for y'all. I'm like, look, Bob, remember the first time we tried to get Bob Moses to come? This is before he came. He and Maisha, it came when we did Radical Equations. First time we did. Bob Moses was in Jackson in his classroom teaching. He says, I'd love to. Dave Dennis came. He said, Dave Dennis. He said, but I can't leave my classroom. I said, brother, I understand. In other words, you ain't got to, sometimes you don't want to be on display all the time. If you want to learn something from us, come to our classrooms. We're
Mm-hmm.
not gonna come here and strap a microphone to our mouth and get up and start doing all this shucking and jiving. In fact, I would say out of 100 people who do that, 99 and a half of them ain't got a classroom you can come to and watch them do it.
Amen. That's the facts that do it now. You are so right. And that's a great point. They don't. They don't. Excellent point, Doc. Listen, we are winding down and coming up on time. You know that
Oh,
you and I could talk about this particular subject forever.
Hey,
But
y'all
what I
spread
want to
this.
say,
Don't miss a week. Watch Shayna every week. So,
thank you, Doc. But what I do want
mhm.
to say to people, we have a big audience today, so please like, comment, and share this episode. The other thing I want to tell folks is thank you for opening up and being a part of this discussion today. I think it's super important, and I think it's something for us to constantly be thinking about how we're showing up in places and how we're showing up for children, which is why I felt like this conversation of wearing the mask was super important. As Doc said, we all do it. We all do it, but make sure when you're wearing a mask, you're choosing the right one.
Mama
Um,
Shayna, that was a brilliant metaphor. You having that epiphany from Sunday, stroke of genius. Y'all just watched that. That was a master lesson you taught today. I appreciate you for coming up with this concept and having us having the conversation this time.
Doc, thank you. Doc, you want to give any final words to the people before we get up out of here?
I just gave them. Thanks, y'all. Love you.
Yes, well, everybody, we will see you back next week, same time. We appreciate y'all. Peace, everybody.